So a friend of mine, Joanna Bush, who's she's like an art director, illustrator. She works on the production design world. She's worked with Ang Lee before, and what's so great to hear is that he's just one of the nicest guys in the world.
Good.
And I was just like, oh man, that's great to hear because
he seems like
it. But
yeah,
it's like sometimes you hear those stories and you're like,
yeah.
Never mind. But
I watched a Charlie Rose interview with him, and he just seemed like a very sweet individual and very much in love with his craft, and you could tell that he really enjoys doing what he does.
No, totally.
I'm Brian Foster, and this is the Grindhouse Institute. On each episode of this podcast, Jeremy Floyd and I program a triple feature movie night. Each of the movies share common themes, and we discuss them here. We're happy you could join us for today's block we call Stressful Thanksgivings. With the holidays quickly approaching, the Grindhouse team thought it was best to celebrate Turkey Day in the best way we know how, by watching a trio of disquieting films, of course. The movies in this block each present their own version of holiday tension, and all are quite different. However, they all have incredible all-star casts and revolve around Thanksgiving. Realizing his love for Lee during a family Thanksgiving dinner, Elliot will do anything in his power to be with her. The only problem is that Elliot is married to Hannah, Lee's sister, who was once married to Mickey, who may be interested in Holly, also Hannah's sister, who he already went on a disastrous date with years ago. Oh, and Lee is dating Frederick, but has feelings for Elliot. Everybody got that? Mia Farrow, Diane Wiest, and Barbara Hershey are Hannah and her sisters from 1986. Amidst the backdrop of the Watergate scandal and an oncoming ice storm, the town of New Canaan, Connecticut rides out the Thanksgiving weekend with pastimes like infidelity, shoplifting, drug abuse, sexual experimentation, and, well, key parties. Kevin Kline, Sigourney Weaver, Christina Ricci, and many more star in Ang Lee's The Ice Storm from 1997. After their daughters disappear on Thanksgiving, two families try to help the police with their complicated investigation, but are they doing more harm than good? Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal head up a killer ensemble cast in Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners from 2013. Thank you for listening to the Grindhouse Institute. Please enjoy.
They're here!
Hello.
Happy Thanksgiving!
Happy Thanksgiving.
Wait till we're invited.
Oh, for God's sake, Keller, get the hell in here.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is a toast. You know, this beautiful Thanksgiving dinner was all prepared by Hannah.
Well, it's great that we can all be together. And this Thanksgiving, no yelling, no hysteria. So let's do it right. And Wendy, why don't you say grace?
Dear Lord, thank you for this Thanksgiving holiday, and for all the material possessions that we have and enjoy, and for letting us white people kill all the Indians and steal their tribal lands and stuff ourselves like pigs, even though children in Asia are being napalmed.
Okay. Jesus, enough, all right.
All right, welcome back to the Grindhouse Institute. I'm Brian Foster, and with me as always is Jeremy Floyd. Hello, and how are you?
Doing well. I finally found a reason to live, and it's the Marx Brothers. Any world that can produce the Marx Brothers is one I want to live in.
Fantastic. Oh, today we are talking Stressful Thanksgivings, which I have been tickled about the title of this episode for a long time. We're going to be talking about three films, I guess of varying degrees of stressfulness and different types of stress. We've got Hannah and Her Sisters from 1986, The Ice Storm from 1997, and Prisoners from 2013. These films, I don't know if they could be any more different from each other.
Yeah.
But definitely I get why we picked this as a Thanksgiving stress, as that's kind of the background of all these, or at least the start of some. But this was quite an interesting one and quite a heart-pounding trilogy, if you will, especially with Prisoners, but this was great.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't go for full-on lighthearted comedy, I think the only other way to do Thanksgiving is stressful.
Go the exact opposite direction, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess Hannah and Her Sisters is a funny movie, though.
It's really funny. However, I mean, it is like stressful at times. There's just a lot of stuff going on there. But also, I think, you were saying that these movies are very, very different from one another, and that is very true. I think the only other way, other than Thanksgiving, that they all feel similar is like their sort of ensemble casts, and they're
Yeah.
like, there are sort of no unknown actors in any of these parts.
No.
It's incredible.
I mean, even in Hannah and Her Sisters in small bit parts, you've got John Turturro and
Right.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus that just show up out of nowhere,
Carrie Fisher, Daniel Stern,
Julie Kavner.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's the smallest part, but Max von Sydow.
He's hilarious.
Steals the show for
Yeah.
the 5 minutes he's on screen.
I should have married you earlier. He's wonderful.
If Jesus saw what people were doing to his name, he would never stop throwing up.
I'm not going to sell my art by the square foot.
Right. I don't sell it by the yard. Or
By
whatever
the
he said.
yard, yeah. I just love that Daniel Stern comes in there kind of hot-headed rich kid, something from New York, probably some broker, just wants big art.
Yeah.
He doesn't care what it is, he just wants big art.
Like, supposedly he was like a rock star or something.
That's
Yeah, it's funny.
I'm looking for something big.
Big. Frederick, show him the oils.
They're all in the basement.
Are they big?
Yeah, some of them are very
Because I got a lot of wall space there.
I don't sell my work by the yard.
Frederick.
I think it's interesting, okay, so these are very, very different films, and I think in sort of tone and the gravity of the stressfulness, they're all very different. But also, very much in sort of the film form, all of them take on this very, very, like, distinct look from one another. I mean, like, in some of our other pairings, I mean, the way that, let's say, all the buddy cop movies that we watched, for instance, it's like, they all have a very similar feel. It's just a different gradation of, is it more funny or more serious. And in this one, like the way that the stories are being told, and like the way that the filmmaking is being conducted is just so different in all of them.
Well, I think that's fully attributed to the directors in question here. You've got Ang Lee, who obviously has a distinct visual style that seems consistent throughout his films.
Right.
Woody Allen's films obviously have they are Woody Allen films. No one else is making those kinds of films. And I'd argue that Denis Villeneuve also is now, in my opinion, a master filmmaker. And his films also have a visual style or a tonal style. And I think that each one of these are so individual to the director and to the storytellers that were, crafting these pieces of art. This is just a great block. Have I mentioned how much I like this block?
I like this block.
I like this Duke.
Really, really did enjoy all three of these films. First time seeing. I thought I'd seen Prisoners before. I had never not seen Prisoners before. This was
Really?
the first time, and man,
Oh my gosh. Okay.
talk about a stressful Thanksgiving. I mean, poor people. Yeah. I mean, we can go in order of movies,
Okay.
but I figured, I just needed to bring that up.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's fine. Let's go in order. But then, like,
Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting. I thought you said you'd seen it, but
Yeah, I did.
I'm glad you got to check it out finally. Then.
God, she's beautiful. She's got the prettiest eyes. Stop it, you idiot. She's your wife's sister.
Let's start with Hannah and Her Sisters. I already brought up the cast, or you brought up the cast, and I had already said that when I saw her on screen, I wasn't sure it was her because we were watching it at our mutual friend there.
We should
outdoor
actually
screen.
say that we actually got to see this one projected in 35 at the Patrick Cady movie theater in his backyard.
Beautiful.
This movie, I guess Prisoners was taking place in what was supposed to be 2013, but it feels kind of like a period piece for some reason.
Really? That's interesting. Like a 90s period piece?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, like, I feel like the phones that people have
The old cell phones.
weren't what people had in 2013. Maybe that was
Interesting.
part of it. Because whatever, somewhere in there, that the 2010, 2011-ish, it seemed like everybody had a smartphone by that point.
And also, I guess that wouldn't really have much impact other than the ability to search on your phone, like, I
Right.
don't know, like the functionality or level of functionality.
The only thing I was going to say about that was just like the other two movies kind of felt like period pieces. And this one, Hannah and Her Sisters, was a contemporary movie. Like, so in 1986, they were supposed to be taking place in roughly 1986. And yeah, that that viewing experience, and seeing it on film actually lent to that pretty well.
It felt like I was in just a small theater similar to the New Bev or something like that, where
Yeah, right.
There needed to be real changes. So there were, brief pauses in between, certain bits of, because that first reel went for quite a long time. And then those other two were just super quick, but it was interesting to see how all that stuff is formatted, for the reels and what they look like. And to see that in person gave such a different type of appreciation for the entire experience. Plus, you guys were there, and it was nice to be in around people, hearing people laugh at a movie, except my own cackle.
Right.
I'm tired of hearing myself laugh at jokes,
Yeah, exactly. Well, and laughter's infectious, and so you get that audience experience.
Exactly.
His setup is interesting because he's got this projector that he can sort of splice two reels together, to make fewer real changes. But, in a projector in an actual theater, like the New Bev or whatever, they'd have them on these platters and they have dual projectors set up so that at the reel change, you'd be able to, move over it seamlessly. And you don't have to pause for everyone to, run to the lobby or whatever.
Oh, I've seen Inglourious Bastards. I know how it works.
yeah. I've seen Fight Club. Okay, I know the cigarette burn.
In the industry, we call them cigarette burns.
Yeah, there's something about that format to watch a Woody Allen film on. Plus, to be totally frank, I haven't watched many Woody Allen films. I always had an odd issue with Woody Allen. Always, because I think by the time that I started understanding who Woody Allen was, he had already started going through some of the controversial issues that he's been dealing with in his personal life. So I do have to say it's kind of hard to praise somebody like that, but it's undeniable how good his films actually are, and like how he can keep so much clearly that must be mostly improvised going on screen. Especially with that first, we get that Aaron Sorkin walk and talk at the beginning when he's in the studio.
Oh, right.
And he's with the other writers and he's trying to figure out the show.
Yeah.
Why are they taking this episode or this segment out? Why are they taking these lines out?
Mickey, listen, we better go right to Ronnie's dressing room. This kid must have taken 1,600 Quaaludes. I don't think he's going to be able to do the show.
Why me, Lord? What did I... Hey! Who changed my sketch about the PLO?
How he moves in between these things and all these scenes and his neuroticism and thing. It's just... everything kind of comes together, and it's really brilliant, the filmmaking.
Yeah, well, you probably started with a good one then. I mean, I feel like most people, if they are watching the first Woody Allen film, it'll probably be Annie Hall, maybe.
Yeah, I've never seen Annie Hall. The only one I saw was Mighty Aphrodite.
Okay, yeah.
Which was okay, which was a good movie. I like it.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
And one day my friend Susie calls me, and she asked me if I want to be in a film, something called Snatch Happy. And I said, sure. And I was very nervous because I'd never done it in front of people with a camera before, And so there I am on the first day. There's this guy fucking me from behind, right? And there's these two huge guys dressed like cops in my mouth at the same time. And I remember thinking to myself, I like acting.
The way that he uses the camera is interesting because it's like, there'll be moments like the one you're talking about there with the walk and talk and sort of the 30 Rock behind the scenes of whatever the
right, exactly.
live variety show that he's putting on.
Yeah, not SNL.
Yeah, the not SNL show that they're working on there.
Right.
And then all the chaos that's surrounding we're going on air in 25 minutes or whatever. And the camera then reflects that and it's really frantic, right? And then then you'll see a lot of these other scenes where the camera sort of doesn't move and it just kind of will sit in that wide shot in the corner while everyone's eating Thanksgiving, and Hannah's explaining how she went back to doing plays, and then she get that out of her system, and now she's gonna go back to being a mother and all this stuff. And in those moments, the camera is as sort of far back as it can be, and then we'll see things like, I think the opening shot is Michael Caine's perspective of him staring at Barbara Hershey from across the room.
And it's his voiceover over, just thinking about all that, yeah.
Right.
The first time she ever walked past me with that perfume, and he's like, I was going to swoon, and you see him in real life just kind of swooning after.
Right, and then it cuts to, him, we're seeing literally what he's thinking.
Right.
Yeah, so it's really interesting how, I guess in certain ways, the the camera is very reserved in this. I think just the opposite would be something like Prisoners, where it's constantly sort of moving and making every shot a Rembrandt. But in this one,
is that
like
Roger Deakins?
Yeah, Roger Deakins.
Yeah,
but also just like the little things, like in Prisoners, like right after the girls first run out of the house and everyone's just got done eating, they're all like hanging out, like trying to stay awake off of tryptophan and wine, and we're experiencing the passage of time, and the way we show that is we go outside of the house and there's just like the slow creepy push in on the trunk of a tree.
Oh right.
And it's very unsettling, but also slightly unmotivated. It's definitely this like style piece versus the like all the like functional ways that the camera is used in Hannah and Her Sisters. Like
more like a documentary camera in Hannah and Her Sisters. We're just capturing the life of these people.
Yeah, or it's like every time the camera moves or every time that there's a close up or whatever, that like there's a lot more sort of I don't know how you say it, like there's
intention.
There's a lot more purpose, like or there's a lot more he's holding back and then giving you those things when you need them. And like
Woody Allen, as you mean?
Yeah, and then you're able to like play everything else sort of in the wide.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
And I think a great example of that is that scene you were just talking about, where it's like Michael Caine brings Daniel Stern over to look at Max von Sydow's art. They go off, Max and Daniel go off into the basement to look at other paintings, and then Michael Caine and Barbara Hershey sit down and have this innocuous conversation, and all the while you're sort of hearing his voiceover, and he's like, I'm going to be really subtle, I'm going to do this the right way, I'm just just tease it out there, just see, get there, dip a toe in the water, and then like all of a sudden they're the only two in the frame, and he just like grabs her and starts kissing her, and she's like, what's going on?
Nothing subtle about it.
Yeah. Right, and it's like the camera has sort of had to move to get into that position to then get the gag to work.
Ask her if you can see her for lunch or a drink tomorrow, and be ready to make light of the offer if she's unresponsive. This has to be done very skillfully and very diplomatically.
Did you ever read this one?
Elliot,
don't!
Lee, I'm in love with you.
Well, I think that I wanted to go back to that pre-show, that studio scene. I really love that scene. A lot of the lines in that scene were really funny too, and you got to watch this thing more than once if you want to catch everything. It's so fast. I mean, Woody Allen, very very funny individual. But he was just like, does anyone have whatever medicine it was, because his ulcer was acting up. Mom, my ulcer's acting up. And the one actor that they're trying to get to work, because he can't work because he ate a drugstore, I think is the way that Woody Allen said. He goes, what do you do, swallow a drugstore?
Right.
I don't feel good, Mickey.
Yeah, what did you do? Swallow a drugstore? Look at this guy.
I lost my voice.
Has anybody got a tag of meth? My ulcer's starting to kill me.
You want a Quaalude?
The one that really got me going was Woody Allen plays this hypochondriac who thinks he has a brain tumor at one point.
Because his ear was ringing.
And he is constantly going to the doctor to find out what's wrong, even though there's nothing wrong. And like the doctor is like jaded, and he's like, yeah, what is it this time? But then there's this possibility that perhaps it's something serious, and so he spends the weekend like just completely out of his mind, and and he's trying to find meaning in life, and he's going to different religions or whatever, and he's trying to join the Catholic Church, and I can't remember what the setup was, but he was talking to the priest, and they're like, well, what is there any reason why you couldn't join the faith or whatever? And it like cuts to his mom like screaming and fainting or whatever in the next room, and then again, that scene I think was very similar, where it's like it was just that shot down the hallway and people kept walking in and out of the scene. And anyway, Woody Allen's dad is like, he's Woody Allen's grilling him about like, well, what, life is meaningless because X, Y, and Z. And he's like, how do you explain this? How do you explain that? He's like, I don't know. What do I know? I don't know anything.
Of course there's a God, you idiot.
But there's a God, then why is there so much evil in the world? Why were there Nazis?
Tell him, Max.
How the hell do I know why there were Nazis? I don't know how the can opener works.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Yeah, the hypochondriac thing kind of just keeps coming back. And he goes to his doctor, and he like one of these lines they stuck with me, and I had to write them down. Was he was like, I've got a pain in my ear, and the doctor's like, well, which one? He goes, my left one. Oh, probably my right one.
Yeah.
No, it might be my left one though. I'm not really sure. And then he's like, well, are you hearing ringing or buzzing? And he's like, yeah. And now you say it, I'm hearing a little buzzing and ringing, and a little ringing and buzzing too, And he's like, well, you're hearing it in both ears? And he's like, why? Is it healthier if I've got an infection in both?
He's like, is it better if I just have it in one or something?
And then they go into that montage of all those little tests that they're doing, like ringing the tone bell. And then Richard Jenkins is the guy that tells him, he's like, he went to him for a second opinion, and he's just on the phone, talking to him. He's like, well, the worst case scenario is you have a brain tumor. And that's when shit just ends for him.
If you have a hearing loss in one ear, and it's not from a virus or a loud noise or anything, what are the possibilities?
Anything. Flu. Even a small noise will do it.
Right, but nothing worse.
Well, yes, I guess the dark side of the spectrum is brain tumor.
Yeah, what's funny is I was thinking about it in sort of all of these cases, and all three of these movies, the sort of recounting some of the events in the movie are so complicated, like the what's happening and who's doing what to whom, and it's like who's related to one another, especially in this one, because in the ice storm it's essentially two families,
right,
and that helps simplify it in some sense. In this one, I guess it's around Hannah's family, which kind of simplifies it in a way, but like there's just like so much going on with Max von Sydow and the Diane Wiest character and Barbara Hershey, Michael Caine, that whole thing. Like,
well, even when you watch the trailer of it and they're like starring, boom, and they put like 10 names up there at once, and they're all like big names.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, that essentially could have been it for any of these movies. I mean, at the time with the ice storm, Tobey Maguire hadn't done like Spider-Man yet, or
or Elijah Wood,
Elijah Wood hadn't done Lord of the Rings or whatever yet, or like in Prisoners, Viola Davis hadn't become the name above the title.
Brilliant.
She was kind of a character actor still at the time.
Holy cow, did she steal that movie?
But it's like and same with I don't know what, maybe David Dastmalchian.
Yeah.
Everyone in that movie is like sort of recognizable, and part of it is that they're more recognizable now than maybe they were when it came out. And that's what I would say about Hannah and Sisters, like the Julia Louis-Dreyfus character that was on there for 2 seconds. Lewis Black, who was also part of that entourage, running around with Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Come on, yeah. I think it's that big New York stand-up comedian crew, right, to get them.
Yeah, exactly. New York staple, and anybody who's working in New York would probably, get cast in one of his movies at some point.
Right.
Doing one a year or two a year for whatever that was, 60 years.
I'm blown away by how he can make just mundane shit though cinematic.
No, exactly, and I think in this case, like I think what helps sell that feeling is just sort of the way the movie comes together. And I thought, okay, we were describing those real changes earlier. When we were getting toward the end of his, religious crisis and, brain tumor crisis and all these things, and we see him again, and he's like running into Diane Wiest in the record store. I was like, wait a minute. Did we miss something in the real change where he watched the Marx Brothers? Because I was like waiting for that, and like didn't realize that I forgot anyway that he told that as a sort of flashback to Diane Wiest later on. But that scene in particular, sort of resolving his crisis there, where he's totally given up on life. Life is completely meaningless. It's a total void. There's no reason to be here. And he was holding a shotgun to his forehead, and it was in his nervous, nebbishy fashion. It was like about to pull the trigger. Apparently the sweat on his forehead was so much that the gun slipped and shot the mirror behind him or whatever.
All of a sudden, the gun went off. I had been so tense, my finger had squeezed the trigger inadvertently. but I was perspiring so much, the gun had slid off my forehead and missed me.
And then he wanders around. And he was very shooketh from the experience, and then wanders around, New York for hours, and wanders into a revival house that was he didn't know what was playing, and he sat down in the middle of duck soup, and decided that life's worth living because the Marx Brothers are hilarious.
And I wandered for a long time. It must have been hours, and I had to sit down. I went into a movie house. I didn't know what was playing or anything. I just needed a moment to gather my thoughts and be logical and put the world back into rational perspective.
Like most of these movies, Thanksgiving is just kind of the setting, and it's an excuse for all of these people to be together. And in Hannah and Her Sisters, it's sort of no different. However, the movie takes place over the course of 3 years, essentially. And Thanksgiving is the touchstone on all three of those moments.
Really interesting way to break up the film.
Right. And it's it's an interesting way to show time's passing, but also that it's an interesting way to structure it because it's so rare to structure a movie around Thanksgiving like this.
But it makes sense, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying about him making mundane stuff look cinematic or feel cinematic, because in a lot of families, the only time they get together is the Thanksgiving holiday or the Christmas holiday. So it makes sense in real life, and it just makes sense in this movie because
right, exactly.
There's a lot of things. I just watched something recently. It's called Midnight Mass. It was a series on Netflix, and there was something where they had to write in a way for everyone to gather into one spot, but throughout the entire show, certain groups of people would not go there. And so they had to write it in. And I thought that was interesting because it reminded me of the formats of these, at least of Hannah and Her Sisters, that was the only way that you could write everyone together realistically, as opposed to, I was just passing by and I decided to come in, or, did you drop this the other day? One of those kind of things. Exactly. At least they wrote it in,
No, that's a good point. And in those scenes, you also kind of see, because you see Thanksgiving so often in this movie, you kind of see how everybody, sort of changes throughout those times. And, when Maureen O'Sullivan and Lloyd Nolan are, going at it, almost coming to blows or whatever, they're just yelling at each other and, going nuts and talking about the old times and, how each one was cheating on the other. And
I'm surprised this is even my son or whatever. He's with all the guys you've been with.
It's a good thing we had a talented daughter.
I can only hope that she was mine. With you as her mother, her father could be anybody in Actors Equity.
Yeah, and what's great is how at a fever pitch that scene starts, and then by the end, he just goes off to calm himself down in the other room and plays piano, and she comes down the hallway and starts kind of singing along with him, or whatever, and and that's how they sort of make up.
Remember this, Hannah?
And I also, one last scene I wanted to talk about on this one was that, again, that sort of tonal shift that he does so well, that when Barbara Hershey comes home and is ready to break up with Max von Sydow, he's talking her ear off about how he was flipping around the television all night long or whatever because he was bored, and watching all this stupid shit, and he delivers this really, really funny, extremely long monologue.
It's been ages since I sat in front of the TV. You see, the whole culture. Nazis, deodorant salesmen, wrestlers. But the worst are the fundamentalist preachers. Third-rate con men telling the poor suckers that watch them to please send in money. Money, money, money. If Jesus came back and saw what's going on in his name, he'd never stop throwing up.
At the end of it, he's like, well, why aren't you talking to me? What's wrong? What's going on? And he gets it out of her that she's leaving and breaking up with him. And then it turns into this breakup scene.
I have to leave. I have to move out.
Oh, Lee, you're my whole world. Good God. Have you been kissed tonight?
No.
Oh, yes, you have. You've been with someone.
Stop accusing me.
And, and then it's just it's completely heart-wrenching. When he just collapses from, the regret of not marrying her earlier. Or
right.
Whatever
Yeah. That's what he was saying. Yeah.
And, to think of where it started, it was just really hilarious too. the sort of stressful ending.
Right.
He just like balances those things so well.
Yeah, I think it's just masterfully writing scenes, right? I mean, they all could sit on their own as a complete story, They all have a beginning, middle, and end.
Right.
In issue number 141 of the Fantastic Four, Reed Richards has to use his antimatter weapon on his own son. It was a typical predicament for the Fantastic Four because they were more like a family, and the more power they had, the more harm they could do to each other without even knowing it.
Let's move on to The Ice Storm from 1997 from
stressful family
Connecticut. Yeah. Did you hear when that guy said that at the beginning? Yeah.
And
over here in
New Canaan, Connecticut.
New Canaan, Connecticut.
I guess that's another thing. Sorry, real quick. I guess that's another thing that kind of ties some of these movies together. Is like they're all very East Coast movies, but the town everything's happening in becomes kind of a character in all of them. It's like New York is a very big part of another character in Hannah and Her Sisters, Ice Storm, the New Canaan, and I guess for one scene, New York City,
right?
But and then
East Coast Connecticut, and then Pennsylvania was
Amish country, right in between Pittsburgh and Philly, and Prisoners,
right?
That sort of wooded area. It was definitely heavily felt in the movie.
Yeah, and The Ice Storm was no exception to that. First of all, Ang Lee, another brilliant filmmaker here that we've got here on the show. Thanks for joining us, Ang. Yeah,
thanks, Ang.
It was very interesting to see this film, especially from an Asian director filming a movie very much about American history.
Are you watching this?
Watching what?
Nixon doofus. It's incredible. He should be shot.
Hey, drop the political assassination stuff, please.
I was puzzling about that Watergate thing for a while. It's like, so this is, I think, before Nixon stepped down, but it's like, in the build-up, just the long slog of like every day, something new is happening on in the saga. But I was like, okay, well, they're putting a lot of emphasis on that. It's not just like, they're watching anything on TV. That this seemed to be like a thematic thing, and I was like, well, I wonder what it meant. And I think part of it was supposed to be that like the Watergate, I feel like for a lot of people, changed the perception on how some of these things exist in the imagination. And it's like, the presidency is this hallowed institution, and we all must respect the president's coming through. Even though I voted for the other guy, this is America after all. And it's like
the curtain has been pulled off and the reveal has been made. Yeah,
curtain fell down, and it turns out there's just nothing behind there. It's just empty. It's just like this void. There's like nothing there, and it's like all of that. Like so, you got the rug pulled out from under you, or the curtain pulled off the stage, whatever the metaphor is.
Sure, yeah.
And you're left in this spot of like, well, how do you make sense of this world that's now, everything you thought was real just turned out to be a backdrop.
Do drugs and drink.
I think part of it is do drugs, drink, and hey, maybe we can fuck our way out of this. It's like
have a bunch of key parties with a bunch of your adult friends and throw a bunch of keys in a bowl.
Right. Yeah. I mean, okay, it's like the kids,
same thing.
Like trying to experiment and figure out what's going on and exploring each other sexually and whatever. Like that kind of made sense or whatever. They're in that stage where they're doing those things, figuring that stuff out. But yeah, I think for the adults and like the key party and like and how just sort of everyone in this small town
screwing each other
was down. And it was like,
how the hell are you going to keep that a secret? When you got Randall Flagg there waiting to get laid too.
The walking dude was.
I'm glad you caught that was Randall Flagg in the stand.
Oh my god! And then the guy Kittredge, you've never seen
Kittredge.
me very upset.
When that girl pulls his keys and he's like, "All right, well, good night, everybody." But there
Oh,
were
God.
moments in this movie that were so comical, I guess, but at the same time there was this really dark undertone for all of them. And
Yeah.
you know, there was a lot of tension in that room, specifically mostly between Kevin Kline and Sigourney Weaver, and that was because Sigourney Weaver at this point was over his shit being his
side piece.
He was more her side piece. if
Yeah,
anything,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Like
yeah.
He wanted to have like I don't know, an emotional affair, and yeah, she was just wanting to get laid.
She's like, I'm already married. I don't need another husband here.
I don't want to take on your problems. Shut the fuck up.
Exactly. Yeah. We're done.
Pick
here.
up your pants and get out of here.
And at the one point, she left him in bed and just left him there, and that's she never came back.
I waited around for more than half an hour, nothing but my boxer shorts.
When I remembered some chores I wanted to get done before the party, I just did them. Because I wanted to get them done before I saw Jimmy.
Jimmy?
I love how he's just like wandering around the house in his underwear. It reminded me of another Kevin Kline movie, A Fish Called Wanda, when like John Cleese is wandering around.
Exactly, but it wasn't Kevin Kline. Yeah.
You said you loved him!
That's right, Otto. Now here's a multiple choice question for you. A, Wanda was lying. B, Wanda was telling the truth. Which one are you gonna pick?
What was the first one?
I think Christina Ricci embodies kind of like that parallel between like we were just talking about how the adults were in this like weird experimentation phase, and she was in that phase too, and she definitely led the charge of like the kids version of that.
Yeah.
And I it was kind of uncomfortable to watch her between Elijah Wood and
Little Man Tate. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was just hard. It was hard to watch kind of like those sexual scenes, especially with in the movie are underage kids. And it was rough, but I think Ang Lee does a good job of creating, something beautiful, something cinematic out of something that could be a little disheartening or disgusting to watch to some people.
I was thinking about that too. It's like, I don't think a movie like this would get made. I mean, for multiple reasons now, because, just these mid-budget movies just don't get made anymore. But also because of some of the subject matter with like, the young teenagers experimenting sexually and everything else. And it's like, well, it's not sort of untrue. And, like what's happening between them isn't predatory, or it's not like date rape or something like that. It's just, it's uncomfortable to think about when you're an adult watching it or whatever. And in that situation. But it is also, sort of like there's a lot to sort of puzzle over there with the Christina Ricci character. It's like, she wanted to mess around with these kids in particular, their neighbors, and their brothers, and she kind of didn't care which one was which, and like
yeah, exactly.
And and she was way more into it than they were, than the guys, Elijah Wood or Little Man Tate. In fact, the younger brother, chickened out when it came time to, you show me yours, I'll show you mine.
Well, the first
playing
time,
doctor
though.
or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the second time he fell in love with her immediately.
Yeah.
He told her he loved her, and she's like, that's nice.
Yeah.
Felt bad for him. But what I don't understand between the two brothers was, I mean, and I don't understand this at all, and I was really hoping to bring it up on this show, was, and I'm going to spoil the ending for a 1997 film, but Elijah Wood's death at the end.
Yeah.
Why? And is it just a random event? Because it becomes quite almost religious like or biblical at the end, the carrying of the body and the moving him from one side or one place to another.
Yeah, the like family learning that the son was dead. I feel like that scene was one of the weaker ones out of how and actually the actual death scene was also a little weak. Everything sort of leading up to it I was really into, like the
I was caught by surprise from this moment.
Oh man, I was too. And I okay, so part of it is like, okay, so it's Elijah, like Christina Ricci was like kept cornering Elijah Wood in these spaces, and making him make out with her, and like almost take his pants off, and getting caught in some of these things. And then during the titular ice storm. They seem like they're going to go rendezvous out in the woods or whatever. But she just comes over to his house and he goes around, playing and jumping around on shit. It's kind of like, he still wants to be a kid and she can't grow up fast enough type of thing. It's like we keep seeing we keep cutting away to him and seeing what he's up to in between cutting to the key party and then the whatever Christina Ricci was up to and the little brother. And then yeah, most of the stuff, it seemed like it made sense to me. It's like, okay, everything's super fucking slippery because of the ice. And so he's sliding down the hill just on his butt. And, he was jumping over some stuff and doing all these things where he's just playing around in it. But then the one that was insane was he was going up to a diving board on an empty pool.
Yeah.
And every step he took, it was slip, slip, slip on a diving board. And it was oh my God. I mean, it almost made it feel like, he didn't have his entire mental capacity. You know what I mean? It's that was what the hell is he doing? It didn't even look fun. It didn't even look like,
no,
fun, dangerous type of thing.
Right.
I'm going to climb too high. And it's scary, but it's also fun. This one would just seem what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. Slip and break your neck in that pool.
It's as if he was trying to die. Now, I don't think that's what was happening, but that's kind of what it almost seemed like. And then he gets tired of sliding around on his butt. He sits down on what I don't know what those things are called, the little guardrail.
I called it a guardrail. Yeah.
Yeah. Sort of a metal guardrail to keep a car from going off the road.
Right.
And he's looking down the street, sees a telephone pole kind of crash, or maybe a tree branch breaks the telephone pole,
yeah.
And a live wire is just swirling on the ground below,
teasing the
death. He sits there and watches it. He's like, "Whoa, what's going on over there?" And then it slowly boom hits the pole, and he's like, "Well, that's weird." And then all of a sudden he's like, "Burr!" and what's strange is, so the camera doesn't stay on his face and watch him go limp and die and have it have that sort of pathetic noise of his life leaving him and kind of oh geez, and make you feel uncomfortable that way. It plays it in this weird way where it's the camera cuts to behind him and he slumps, you hear the noise and he's slumps off the side, and then we cut to this sort of 3/4 shot down the street and his body's sliding down face first.
Right. Yeah.
And the sort of suddenness of him dying, the fact that we were behind him and his body sliding down, I started laughing really hard. It was
because it was visually and strange. Yeah.
And also he when he was looking at the live wire, whipping around or whatever, he looked like a Christmas Story when he's like, "Oh fudge."
It's get the fuck out of there, bro.
Yeah. But I mean, there was this tragic element missing.
Yeah, I feel you totally.
I think part of it was just the way it was covered. If they had done sort of just the opposite, where instead of being behind him in sort of a in a close, but or being across the street and being in front of him, and being a super wide and just watching him die and then slide, it would probably feel a lot less comic because it would just be kind of still and in clinical.
Right, because you don't see him slip. You don't see him slip in the first shot that he dies. Right. If you see the whole thing, then you kind of put the pieces together, as opposed to it seems like he died, someone took him, pushed him face down into the ice and slid him down. You know what I mean? It was too choppy or something.
Yeah, or it's okay, let's say you can't do that stunt and have it work in the...
Then don't write it. And don't write it.
And playing all in one like that, it's not practical or something. If you're going to do it in pieces like the way they did it, okay, let's see his face. Let's see the life go away and have it not be funny that way.
Yeah.
And see that lifeless face hit the ground or something before we see that shot of him sliding face first. I mean, without any context, the sliding face first, without that sort of added context, the sliding face first comes off as hilarious.
That looked fun.
As opposed to
not the jumping
tragic.
Not jumping on the icy diving board, but slipping face first in some ice. That looks pretty dope. I would do that, I agree. I was kind of pulled out at that moment. Like, I feel like the last, like, 5 minutes of the movie kind of just took it out of me, but I love the rest of it. I love the rest of it.
Yeah, I was definitely into the rest of it, and it was like, because I was laughing so hard at that moment, it also, like, kind of took the wind out of some of the last part of it, too, which,
right.
It was also played very awkwardly. It's like, Kevin Kline sort of brings his body up on the porch there. The dad comes out after having awkward car sex with Kevin Kline's wife, Joan Allen. And, like, he comes out and his whole mind is blown and it, like, he's going through way too much really fast. And, like, he brings him back inside. And then everyone comes into the family and they all start getting hugs real quick, one by one. And then I think we're out, right? I mean, like, oh, no. We go back to Tobey Maguire coming back on the frozen train. And then sees the like traumatized family at the platform waiting for him.
Oh, right,
and that's where we end.
Eek.
So stressful Thanksgiving, yeah. But
it's not like we're leaving a good note to go on to a nice, heartwarming film either.
I suppose my reluctance was the group aspect of it. I've never been much of a joiner.
Well, I of course flatter myself that our church is not exactly what most people would call organized religion. And of course, I've begun to minister much more in what one might call therapeutic environments, in small groups and couples and one-on-one.
Part of it is the whole time Joan Allen knows that Kevin Kline is banging the neighbor, Sigourney Weaver. And Dana Barrett. And she swears there was something in her fridge and the eggs were cooking on themselves on the countertop.
I heard a voice say Zool. It was right here.
And when she reached into the bowl of keys, she didn't ask, "Are you the keymaster?"
Well, that's great. Either I have a monster in my kitchen or I'm completely crazy.
I don't think you're crazy.
Oh, good. That makes me feel so much better.
Before we sort of learn that Joan Allen knows all these things, we see her like sort of in this quaint small town, rummaging through what looks like kind of a garage sale or maybe a flea market or something, and she gets stopped by some guy who
beautiful hair.
He's got this beautiful mane, and it's like he's got this long
Professor
flowing
jacket.
locks, but his like hair part starts like a millimeter above his ear. So he like talks to her about like, oh, remember last year you came by my cult and you didn't stick around, but I thought you were great and blah blah blah. But it's funny because like he was just like the least convincing cult leader in history.
Is that what we were supposed to get out of him?
That's what it sounded like. I mean, everything about him was like, we've got the new church where we can fuck anyone and whatever he was talking about.
That's what it was, yeah.
And it sounded like some new age kind of Charles Manson style cult shit.
Jonestown.
But unlike Jonestown or any of these other cult leaders where they've got the gift of convincing people, this guy just is like, he's all smarm and no charm. Like he's got that on his business card.
Sometimes the shepherd needs the company of the sheep.
I'm going to try hard not to understand the implications of that.
Forgive me.
And then I love the scene, or I don't know, the parallel scene with Christina Ricci and Joan Allen at different times going and like robbing that pharmacy or whatever to like feel alive. Yeah. And I feel like that too is a part of the whole Nixon Key Party, the fuck our way out of this thing. Where it's like
escapism, or let's do something. Let's be a good person trying to be bad, kind of thing.
Yeah, or it's like let's do something to feel alive, like steal.
Yeah.
Or maybe let's do something to feel alive, like stand on a fucking icy diving board on an empty pool.
and then not die until you sit to take a rest.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's what we're missing, is that was just totally symbolic by the end, and it was just
right that everyone there had some sort of like, I don't know, it's kind of a type of death drive, I guess. Like the way that they tried to feel alive was by doing dangerous things or doing taboo things or whatever. And the whole town got caught up in it, even though mostly figures around these two families who happen to live just up the way a spell from each other.
Well, speaking of two families, should we move on to the two families and prisoners who have to deal with some awful things on Thanksgiving evening?
We certainly shall.
Okay, so first of all, I know I said before that I had seen this. I thought I did. I might have got this confused with something else. This is my favorite Denis Villeneuve film now, by far.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely. I think
even more than Enemy, huh?
I think this and Enemy are very close, first and second for me.
Was it because they have such different endings where it's just Jake Gyllenhaal's face cut to black?
They're both the same. Wait, you don't get the spider as the last shot in Enemy? It's actually Jake Gyllenhaal's
see
face.
his reaction to it.
Oh, okay.
And then
it
it's
cuts.
Cut to black, yeah.
I want to talk about Jake Gyllenhaal first of all. He's incredible in this movie. I love the character that they built around him, Detective Loki.
Right.
I just think that's amazing. The whole art direction around this character, he had like runes as like tattoos on his fingers. If you see, there's a shot of his knuckles.
And he's got the like Mason ring.
Who controls the British crown? Who keeps the metric system down? We do. We do.
I think that this movie was first of all, I think Denis Villeneuve, again, working with Deakins is one of like the greatest combinations ever. Because I think Denny has an absolute vision, and I think the right person to deliver that vision is a great cinematographer, which we have. And the use of symbolism and the use of the mazes, the names, the tattoos, like the difference between Loki's character and the Dover character, and they're kind of at odds of each other. However, they've kind of got the same mission. They just have to go about it two completely different ways. And the way that they presented that throughout this film, I thought was so well done.
It's interesting. I like you say that, but I think that wasn't the case. Like Loki was the only one trying to work this thing the right way. Like none of the other cops including his captain or whatever, that guy is always like, fuck you, no, fuck you, and like, hey, have a drink, well, I think we're done here or whatever. And all that stuff, like nobody wanted to solve this thing the right way. Certainly not Keller. Keller just grabbed the first suspect he saw and like went crazy over him. But Jake Gyllenhaal was being torn apart by not being able to like figure this thing out, and it was so complicated, and like there's so many ins and outs. And yes, obviously, everyone wanted to have this crime solved. But what I mean is that like the only person sort of going about it in a way that could get anything positive as a result was the Jake Gyllenhaal character, I guess.
You don't think that just pulling the first suspect you come to, putting him into a trap that you built out of a bathroom in an abandoned apartment building, where you have it's just a random event where you get scalding hot water or freezing cold water get poured on you, and the only room you have is to sit down?
Right.
You don't think that that's the right route? That maybe Jake Gyllenhaal should have taken that route?
Yeah. No. Torturing the sort of special needs guy, and turning his face into hamburger, and going crazy. Like obviously wasn't the way to go.
Paul Dano owned this role, and he wasn't given a whole lot in terms of like lines.
Mm-hmm.
But every time he was on screen, I felt both uneasy as well as
well, I mean, you felt sympathy for him.
Sympathy is the word I'm looking for. Yeah.
It's complicated, especially the first time you watch it. Like, you're not sure whether or not he's being played or not. Whether or not Hugh Jackman's being played by Paul Dano, that is. But the way that Paul Dano responds to everything, every single time, it's like Jake Gyllenhaal was, intimidating him in that interrogation room, and he was like, "Oh, don't touch me." He's like, and he doesn't understand the questions and all these things, and then he gets these little moments where he expresses himself a little more clearly.
Like they didn't start crying until I left.
Mm-hmm.
One of the lines where you get confused as to whether or not he's in on this against Hugh Jackman.
Right. And I think part of that was some misdirection, because it's like one of these moments where he's finally saying something kind of clearly, but he's not talking about the thing that Hugh Jackman thinks he's talking about.
Right.
And a lot of those context issues, like sometimes when someone has trouble expressing themselves like that happens quite a bit, where it's like, you can't quite puzzle out what they're going for all the time because the context is all in their head, and their ability to express that doesn't match what's in there.
I recognize these girls.
I didn't see them. May I sit down?
What do you do in the RV? Answer my questions.
Sleep there.
You were sleeping out there during the day? Why was the RV parked outside the house?
I went for a drive.
I know for a fact those girls were playing outside your RV. You weren't driving, it was parked. Was it a special day? Were you planning on taking 2 little girls?
No.
Have you done that before?
No.
You ask them to come inside the RV and then you take them away?
No.
And that was clearly what was happening with the Paul Dano character, or I shouldn't say clearly. It became clear that was what it was with the Paul Dano.
Over time, yeah.
And I guess I'll also walk back my Jake Gyllenhaal thing too. It's like, he cared a lot, and he was trying to do the right thing, and he didn't know which way was up, and everything was so complicated and everything was so crazy. And he's like, suspects Hugh Jackman at one point because he's like, what's going on with this guy? And then when he tries to give David Dastmalchian the business, well, that didn't end well.
No, it did not. That's a brutal scene.
It's pretty much
shocking.
Pretty much that describes every scene in this movie.
That's true.
Yeah. But I forgot how sort of complicated the plot was. Like I feel like I had remembered a bunch of it, but watching it again was really interesting, and I feel like I understood it better is what I was going to say, but I wonder if maybe I did understand it the previous time, but I've forgotten all the details type of thing.
Or are you looking at it from a newer perspective? You have new experiences.
That could be too. Yeah, it's just sort of everywhere. It's like everywhere you look. Like Melissa Leo was great. I mean, she was just like so captivating.
Amazing.
And Terrence Howard kept stealing every scene.
Viola Davis,
like, and how he would do these things like that. Okay, so like I feel like at the time when this movie came out, it's like, okay, this is like kind of marketed as a thriller, and for a thriller, it's whatever, almost 2.5 hours, like 2:20 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty long, and I feel like at the time it got a lot of heat for being so long, and then also
really
for being a thriller, it's like people were probably expecting something more like Ransom.
Okay.
The Mel Gibson movie.
This was far better than Ransom.
but what I mean is like that Ransom's kind of a popcorn movie, and
exactly.
It's not too heavy, and
No, this is an Oscar movie we're talking about here, right?
Yeah, this one,
but
like,
people didn't think that they were going into that.
Well, because it's like it's not as sort of maybe mundane and like messy as one would expect from an Oscar bait type movie, where it's like it's just a straight drama, and bad things happen sometimes, and throw your hands up. I don't know. In this one, there was a really complicated sort of thriller plot at the center of it, but it was that subject matter was taken very seriously. But this movie being marketed as a thriller, I think, kind of put it in that category of like, well, why isn't this any fun? Like usually thrillers are fun, and this one is pretty heavy.
This one doesn't take any, doesn't give you any breaks, like
right.
Even the Ice Storm, for being such a dark film, there's funny ass moments, I mean, Woody Allen's movie is funny.
Yeah.
This one does not give you any levity whatsoever. Maybe Maybe the
Yeah.
beginning Thanksgiving scene when they're just setting up nice peacefulness before they drop the hammer on you and these two
Yeah.
girls are taken, and it's from there it is not a pleasant ride, but it's phenomenal.
Yeah, but it lets you know. I mean, even if you didn't know a single thing about this, which I mean, it kind of sounds like that you kind of walked into it in that sense where it's like
Cold.
Yeah, totally cold. It's like that first time you see the camper, it's creepy.
Yeah.
And then the second time you see it, the kids are fucking with it, and you're like, well, this is no good. Even though, like, in between some of those moments, it's like the family, chitting and chatting about what they're up to, and, they're just messing around, like Terrence Howard playing that trumpet really terribly, and all these things. But I like the opening scene is also so refreshing in a movie like this, where it's like you do get to know everybody a little bit. And you get a little, a taste for what everything was like beforehand.
Right.
Hugh Jackman is this sort of doomsday prepper guy, and he gives his son that speech in the beginning, and then later we see his like gas mask down in his like survival basement and like batteries and.
How perfectly organized was that stuff? Like, I would love to be that organized.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's almost as if a production designer put that together.
I saw a half-used bag of lye down there. We had to bury the dog.
Right. And what's funny is, like, you don't know if that's true or not. I mean,
Exactly,
like,
yeah.
Obviously, like, we don't really see him use the lye on Paul Dano, so it's not as if that was the case. But
that was just to burn, right? Similar to what they do in Fight Club, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, maybe. Jesus.
Yeah.
There's a bag of lye in your basement. It's half empty. Your wife thinks you've been helping us, and we both know that's not true.
I used the lie to bury our dog last year. And helping the cops sounds better than I've been driving aimlessly in my truck because I don't know what the fuck else to do.
Is that what you were doing last Saturday night?
Probably. Am I a suspect?
I'm only asking because you assaulted a man who's now missing.
Thought you had him under surveillance.
I'm going to assume that you're asking me because you have no idea.
Yeah, well, it couldn't be that he skipped town because the asshole was guilty. Or it couldn't be that, right? Because that'd mean it'd be your fault, right?
What was exciting was that we spent that first 15, 20 minutes just like getting to know everybody, and it's okay before we meet Jake Gyllenhaal, but like, we get a sense of the before and we get a lot of after, with poor Maria Bello, just like pilled out and like sobbing in bed and like
also one that steals this movie.
It's hard to say that. It's like everybody does it. Yeah.
Which I think that that's great writing. That's great direction. Everyone has their moment to shine and everyone really does. I also think it's interesting that something we've brought up on other shows, Chekhov's gun. In this one, we had Chekhov's whistle, the red whistle.
Oh, yeah.
That, we see at the beginning that's established. And then at the end, that's kind of the call for help or the sign of hope, if you will, just barely heard underneath the Trans Am and the that hole that's in the ground.
Right. What's funny? Like, I think the first time I watched it, I thought maybe that was like, I don't know, the wind somehow blowing through the whistle down there, because it just seemed like so much time had passed and it was freezing and whatever else. I don't know, but
that
like
he would be dead already. You mean?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
It's more like Schrodinger's cat down there. It's like, that Schrodinger's Wolverine. Is he alive or dead? And we won't know until we open up the Trans Am hole.
Well, what an interesting shift, right? By the end of the film, because the whole movie we're trying to find two girls that were kidnapped, and we find out through a twisty bunch of events that it's basically a family of kidnappers, and Paul Dano was actually one of those victims when he was a young boy.
Right. And so was David Dastmalchian, right?
They both were?
Right. That was the thing. It's like, and Melissa Leo mentions it toward the end there when she's Mr. Bonding Hugh Jackman into the Trans Am or whatever.
Yeah.
But essentially, Dastmalchian got away at one point. But, the whole idea was that, I don't know, he was...
And that's why the mazes were stuck in his head?
So fixated on the mazes and, like, all the, like, punishment with the snakes and, like, the, having to get the kids' clothes. Like, he was, like, breaking into their houses to, like, steal the clothes to, like, complete his, his mental picture in those like locked.
He was harmless in a way, right? But obviously through all this confusion, he would be a top suspect.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain what it is that he's doing there, and especially when he's so, psychologically damaged and whatever else.
So we've got Paul Dano, who is special needs, clearly. I mean, that's the character. That's not ambiguous by any means. I would say the same for David Dastmalchian's character.
Mm-hmm.
But now, what about Jake Gyllenhaal's character? There's a lot of tics that he has.
Mm-hmm.
Like he blinks really hard a bunch of times, and you'll see it over and over again that happens, and it's usually in a moment of great stress or like when something is, pressing him. And I'm wondering if they were trying to hint at him kind of, because he's a loner, right? During all of this, his job seems to be the only thing that he's got in his life.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't ever see him at home. He's only, I don't know what, in this...
In the field?
In this profession. It's like, and in fact, I think the only scene where we really see him not on the job is the first time we meet him at the Chinese restaurant.
He's eating by himself.
Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah,
by himself.
At a Chinese restaurant. Like there's a lot behind that, right? He's got no one. He's got no family. He doesn't have that.
Right.
But now it's his mission to find these girls. I mean, he doesn't even know about that mission yet.
Right.
But did you catch that at all with his character? I mean, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder. Okay, maybe part of that too is like, he just maybe he's somewhat on the spectrum or something. If he has no filter with like anyone he talks to. I mean, although maybe that's not true. He does try to keep himself under control around Hugh Jackman and the family and everybody, but like
just let me do my job, sir. Yeah.
Mr. Dover, I understand this is an incredibly hard time, but I have every uniformed police officer in this state looking for Anna.
They said he tried to get away. I don't understand why he would try to run away.
We're considering all possibilities, Mr. Dover. I'm not crossing anybody off my list. Just let me do my job.
I kind of read the eye thing as like, well, it's just like how he processes stress, but I don't know if that's what they're going for or not. I mean, perhaps. I guess there's something there to read into it. I mean, the thing is, it's just that like unfortunately with his character, we're just missing a little bit of like what's going on with him. I mean, obviously we know that this event is super stressful for him.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, we don't know anything about him really. Except for that he's lonely, I guess.
Right, and they set up that
starts.
stress so strongly by saying that he's a detective that literally has never lost a case. Every one of them every perp has been caught, every case has been closed successfully, and this one is just driving him to the limits.
Right. Yeah, and I guess this one's no different, right? I mean, in the end,
exactly, yeah,
he does solve it.
Even though, your buddy there, Wayne Duvall, the captain there, who's trying to give him booze, and all right, dude, it's all right. We win some, lose some. It's like two girls, man. He's like,
exactly.
Fuck your sorries. You go tell the girls after Dastmalchian blows his own head off. It's like cold.
In detective fiction, it's always like there's like the driven detective who really gets obsessed with the case and wants to solve it, and then there's everyone else who's just punching a clock, and it's like, what the hell is wrong with you? Why don't you go home? And there isn't really a home to go to, I guess, for the Jake Gyllenhaal character in this one.
An interesting answer that there were some extra features on this one. I actually ended up watching this one like on Amazon, and there was 15 or a 20-minute piece at the end, just like behind the scenes, some interviews. And Villeneuve was giving an interview, and he said that this movie could easily have taken place in more of an Old West setting as a Western. And it's almost as if the cowboy is trying to take the law into his own hands while the sheriff is out there trying to do things in more of a by-the-book way. And I think that really comes through after hearing that. It's like, that'd be a very interesting Western.
Yeah, that's true. I guess in that sense, it's kind of, that John Carpenter modeled after a Howard Hawks character type of thing, where it's like you get this character only in the context of their profession or whatever. But I'd say other than maybe the sort of on the cop side, like with the two families here, the Hugh Jackman, Maria Bello, and Terrence Howard, Viola Davis characters. we do get a lot of moments with them, and even like the Hugh Jackman's son, you know, when he was like, you know, sort of waking up sobbing in his sister's room and all this stuff, and like, you know, we do like get all these quiet moments, and I think this like goes to what I was saying earlier about how we get to spend some time with the family before the ruckus started. We also don't forget about these scenes where it's like, you know, we see Viola Davis like microwaving turkey leftovers or whatever, and the, you know, the microwave dings and, you know, she doesn't move, you know, and she's just like frozen. And, you know, we see plenty of those moments with Hugh Jackman and what it is that he's up to. And of course, Maria Bello's, you know, medicating herself and all these other things. And what's nice is that he does play all these moments and have them, you know, able to breathe in a movie where you'd think the temptation would be to sort of cut that stuff down. Let's get to the thrilling parts of it again. Let's get to, you know, Jake Gyllenhaal beating up his desk and, you know,
right,
you know,
throwing his phone around,
solving crimes and
yeah,
talking to the CSI guy or whatever in David Dastmalchian's house or whatever. Like,
right.
That was another example of like a cop character that we saw who was just punching a clock, and he's like, yeah, how do you explain this? How do you explain that? And he's like, I don't know. Forget it.
Yeah, move on.
Yeah, move on.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I, you know, kind of appreciated how this movie straddled that, like, taking the drama seriously, but also, you know, pushing the thriller aspects of it. I mean, I know that, like, for Terrence Howard, a lot of it was him being weepy, and for Hugh Jackman, a lot of it was him just, you know, being 10 out of 10 angry. But that scene where, like, Terrence Howard hadn't told Viola Davis yet what was going on, and he comes back home, and like they're having that candlelight, the sort of neighborhood's having the candlelight vigil for him, and he like kind of, you know, breaks down and can't stand up, and he looks like he's about to puke, and he's just like, you know, it was just such a great like character moment for, you know, all the sort of turmoil that's like roiling up inside him. And
at one point you're going to break, right? You can't stand, you have no more strength. It's all going to go away. You can hold it together for a while, but we're human, you know?
Well, and it's like, you know, there's the stress of losing his child, but then also like the guilt.
Yeah. He's holding
of what he's doing. And he, the whole time he keeps saying like everything they're doing is wrong. But he keeps going through with it. And, you know, then Viola Davis like learns, and she's like, what the hell were you thinking? All right, take me to him. I'm going to try to get it out of him.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, and she joins the party too, like, of trying to torture this guy. Now she was trying to, I don't know what, coax it out of him through kindness or whatever, but
she took a different approach. Yeah,
didn't work out, and then, you know, it also resulted in more torture.
Please help me. Can you help me find my little girl? Got a picture. See? This is my baby. Her name is Joy. This is stuffed animal we got over chose to because she's afraid to sleep by herself. Please tell me where my little girl.
But how great was that scene where it's like, okay, we set up, you know, the Hugh Jackman character in the very, very opening shot in the woods. They're hunting. He's like, you know, doing the Lord's Prayer or whatever before his son like shoots the deer. And
always
then
over prepare and that speech.
Well, so right before that, he's just, you know, reciting a prayer before they shoot the deer.
Oh, yep.
And then later, he's trying to do that same Lord's Prayer while he's got Paul Dano in the like the hot water, cold water torture chamber, and he's like slumped down in the doorway, you know, trying to give this whole prayer, and it's like he gets to the part where he's supposed to say, and forgive those who trespass against us, and he can't get it out because like of what he is doing, and like the part that he's supposed to be following that advice of, he can't follow, and like he can't even say that thing.
Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses. As we
Prisoners, I mean, I feel like that was the first time that most Americans, or non-art house film goers got to see anything by Denis Villeneuve. And, he had done 3 movies in French before this. And then I guess, as we talked about with Enemy, it's like he kind of shot Enemy and then this back to back. And then Enemy, I think, came out first, but no one saw it. And then this is kind of a bigger film. And it's such a big way to be introduced to a wider audience, and and you can see how like a lot of these elements in here kind of helps translate into the things where now he's doing these huge movies, and even bigger movies on the scale of Sicario and even Arrival, which isn't that much bigger, but still a little bigger than this one.
Yeah.
And then all the way up to Dune, right?
Yeah.
But you see how in that, him not backing away from those character moments in here, but also, approaching everything with a lot of style, with, the music. And then we talked about the cinematography a little bit, the Roger Deakins stuff. He's worked with Roger Deakins a whole bunch, and that was, collaboration that he's continued. But, you just see right out of the gate that there's this sort of a vision and the way he approaches things that it's not your average sort of rinse and repeat director, but and it's not surprising that this was helped him sort of launch that part of his career.
Hello again. Hey, I thought maybe you could use some help around I noticed your door here needs fixing, so I brought my tools and
Oh, I see. I'm glad you want to talk some more. No need to make excuses. You come on in and make me a cup of tea.
We were talking about Roger Deakins earlier, and I meant to bring this up because but you were kind of on a roll, so I didn't stop you, and then I forgot about it. But wanted to mention the cinematographer on the Ice Storm.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were talking about this film block at the sort of Hannah and her sister screening the other day, they were talking about how the Ice Storm was just sort of beautifully filmed, and of course it was, and especially when we actually see the ice part of the Ice Storm, and the cinematographer, I went to look up what he'd worked on, and he'd done a whole bunch of stuff, and he kind of came up with David Lynch, so he was shooting Eraserhead all the way back, right?
Oh.
And then he shot a bunch of stuff for Jim Jarmusch. He did the HBO thing the night of, so he's got a whole bunch under his belt.
Frederick Elms.
Yes, Frederick Elms is his name. And then but one of the things that he did earlier on, which was interesting, was he shot The River's Edge, which was the Tim Hunter written and directed movie. And Tim Hunter's good friends with Patrick Cady. Tim Hunter also owned the print of Hannah and Her Sisters, which we ended up watching with Patrick. So
this is our 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
6 degrees of Patrick Cady. So anyway, thanks again, Tim, and thanks again, Patrick, for helping screen this one and put it together.
Thank you so much.
A whimpering, simpering child again, bewitched, bothered, and bewildered.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I think by the time you're listening to this, it should have already been or is Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving. I'm putting that on the editor for this one.
Yeah. Hopefully, we're hearing this right before Thanksgiving, and you're just about to sit down to your turkey roll.
I hope so. Next up, obviously, we're going to be moving on to Christmas movies, but we're going to be doing some low-key Christmas movies where Christmas only plays a background
Detective
role.
low-key?
Detective low-key. We're going to be watching Gremlins from 1984, Batman Returns from 1992, and Catch Me If You Can from 2002. What a block. This will be a fun block. This will actually put a smile on our face.
Yeah, it'll be a little less stressful than than the Thanksgiving block. And, they're also, when you go to sit down and watch Christmas movies, sometimes you want to watch Miracle on 34th Street and It's a Wonderful Life and Home Alone and some of these Christmas Vacation and all these Christmas classics. And sometimes you want to do something a little more low-key, and that's what we're having in mind here. So.
What do you know about that? Merry Christmas!
All right, thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to subscribe and follow us on all the podcasts and social platforms at the Grindhouse Institute. And if you really want to give us a boost, check us out on Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps us to get noticed. Thanks so much, everybody. We will be back next week.
Ciao.
Millions of books written on every conceivable subject by all these great minds, and in the end, none of them knows anything more about the big questions of life than I do.